Welcome to our DAN Education series, in which we're going to be discussing diving and the heart. And we're going to start with Chapter 1, which deals with the basics of the heart and circulatory system. And a very sobering statistic that unfortunately nearly a third of cardiac deaths are associated with scuba diving fatalities. So it's very important to understand about the heart and diving. Scuba diving is an appealing recreational activity for people of all ages. Indeed, diving in favorable conditions requires little exertion, making it easy for the uninitiated to assume that diving is safe and an effortless pastime. But it is essential to keep in mind that during any dive, perilous circumstances can arise and may call for vigorous exercise at a moment's notice. In fact, even immersion alone is a stressor on the body, especially on the heart and cardiovascular system. People who have a limited exercise capacity may therefore be pushed to their limit by diving, in fact to the point of serious injury and even death. This chapter and this part explains some of the basic information about the heart in relation to diving, to keep you as safe and healthy as possible while you dive. Let's start off by looking at how diving affects your health and circulatory system. Scuba diving exposes you to many effects, including immersion, cold, hyperbaric gases, elevated breathing pressure, exercise, stress, as well as post-dive risk of gas bubbles circulating in the blood. Your heart's capacity to support an elevated blood output decreases with age and of course with disease. Having a healthy heart is therefore of the utmost importance to your safety while scuba diving, as well as your ability to exercise generally and your lifespan. The information we're presenting is therefore devoted to helping you understand your heart, exercise and heart disease and how it may affect you, whether you're diving or not, and how you can promote optimal heart health. Let's start off by looking at the effects of immersion. So just plunging in water, in other words not diving, just being in water, and in fact even in water at the temperature of the human body, 37 degrees centigrade, even that exposes your body to a pressure gradient, which shifts blood from the vessels that are in your legs to those in your chest. In many ways, it resembles zero gravity. This increases the volume of blood within your chest by up to 700 milliliters, and your heart therefore takes up an additional 180 to 240 milliliters of blood, resulting in enlargement in all four chambers of the heart and an increase in pressure in the right atrium. And you'll see why this is important soon. More than a 30% increase in cardiac output is the result of this, and a slight increase or change in blood pressure. Now it doesn't always increase, but there is an effect, and there are regulatory systems in place that are able to adapt to the change in the environment. There are baroreceptors or pressure sensors that can perceive a change in blood pressure, and they are within the body's major blood vessels, particularly in the aortic arch, and they react to these changes by decreasing the activity of your sympathetic nervous system, which popularly is called the fight or flight response, and as a result, your heart rate declines. The concentration of plasma norepinephrine a hormone of the sympathetic nervous system drops, and in response to the drop, your kidneys excrete or release more sodium, and there's an increase in urine production, which all divers are familiar with. So now let's look at the effects of cold. Water has high thermal conductivity. In other words, your body loses more heat when you are in water than when you are in dry air at the same temperature. You will feel it far more acutely than you would if it were in air. Even in fairly temperate water, temperature preservation or wearing garments that actually conserve body temperature are important to protect you against this loss of temperature. Now, when your body loses heat, it intensifies the narrowing of the peripheral blood vessels. In other words, the blood vessels that are in the arms and legs. And this is called peripheral vasoconstriction. This in turn sends more blood to your heart, which increases the filling pressure on the right side of the heart and makes it pump even more blood. Constriction of the small arteries also increases resistance to blood flowing through the periphery of your body, which can raise your blood pressure, meaning that your heart really needs to adapt almost beat by beat, moment by moment, to exert itself to keep up with the demands of the diving environment. And this affects your entire body. Next, let's look at the effects of pressure. Breathing air under increased pressure, as you do when scuba diving, affects your heart and circulatory system in a variety of ways, and we've spoken about the vasoconstriction and changes in blood pressure. In addition, there may be an increase in carbon dioxide, which may accumulate in your body when you exercise, even during a dive, and breathing normally according to how you feel. But due to a relatively reduced ventilation of the lungs or pulmonary system and the density of gases, this may increase blood flow through to the brain and may even speed up oxygen toxicity, particularly if you're breathing a so-called hyperoxic gas mix, that is, one with elevated levels of oxygen. So now to all of this, let's add exercise. Diving can, at times, be very physically demanding. But recreational divers have the option of choosing diving conditions and activities that typically do not require a lot of exertion. Nevertheless, any dive places some metabolic energy demands on your body. For example, even slow finning on the surface, barefoot, increases the intensity of activity, while finning with fins may require up to about 40% less energy than barefoot swimming. But the addition of scuba diving equipment increases drag on the swimmer, and the energy cost of swimming therefore increases. A 1996 paper or journal in Medicine, Science, in Sports and Exercise showed that wearing one scuba tank may increase a diver's energy consumption by 25% over regular surface swimming at the same speed. If you use a dry suit, that may result in an additional 25% increase in energy consumption. Most dives are conducted in neutral buoyancy conditions with no additional current. Only short intervals of intermittent swimming may therefore be required, and it could be at a slow pace. And this represents low to moderate intensity activity. Exercise intensity may change, however. and it's important to be aware of this. How we measure exercise activity is actually done through a unit called the metabolic equivalent, or MET. Now, 1 MET is essentially couch potato mode. In other words, when you are consuming the minimum amount of energy. It is suggested that divers should be able to sustain exercise at least 6 METs for a period of 20 to 30 minutes in order to have basic fitness. Since people can sustain only about 50% of their peak exercise capacity for a prolonged period of time, it is recommended that divers also be able to pass an exercise stress test at 12 times metabolic activity, or 12 METs. And now let's add stress. Your autonomic nervous system is largely involuntary, and it regulates internal functions such as your heart rate, respiratory rate, and digestion. It is affected by diving too. Among the components of the autonomic nervous system are both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic system governs your body's fight, flight, or freeze response. The parasympathetic system governs resting functions and helps your body to conserve energy. In healthy individuals, diving generally increases parasympathetic effects, preserving heart rate, and a measure that is known as heart rate variability. Heart rate variability means there is a change literally from beat to beat. In a dive that is perceived as stressful, however, it pushes the autonomic nervous system in the other direction, meaning the sympathetic system prevails, resulting in an increase in heart rate and a decline in heart rate variability, with an increase in heart arrhythmias or rhythm disturbances. Lastly, in this part, let's look at the serious adverse effects related to diving. Most of the effects that diving has on your heart and circulatory system fall well within your body's capacity to adapt. But sometimes serious adverse reactions can occur. A reaction known as bradyarrhythmia, or very slow irregular heartbeat, which can cause sudden death upon a diver's entry into water, especially in individuals with a pre-existing heart anomaly. On the other hand, tachyarrhythmia, which is a rapid and irregular heartbeat, can also cause sudden death, especially in divers with structural or ischemic heart disease. And overexertion or the effects of stress may strain the heart and result in acute manifestations, even of previously undiagnosed ischemic heart disease. And these effects are not only true for scuba. Breath hold diving can also have effects on the heart. In fact, it has a very rapid succession of effects called the diving reflex. The most significant elements include bradycardia, which is a slowing of the heart rate, which is even most pronounced in cold water, peripheral vasoconstriction, as described previously, and progressive hypoxia, or lack of adequate supplies of oxygen to the body. To avoid bursting a lung, scuba divers must of course never hold their breath, particularly during ascent. In subsequent sections, we will be discussing other aspects of the basics of heart and exercise. Please continue watching us. Join us through the various social media, YouTube, Twitter, and thank you for supporting Dan, even if it means just watching these educational pieces.